My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 30 years old. And on the day I was supposed to become someone's wife, I found my parents seated beside a service hallway and a rolling trash bin while strangers drank champagne at the table meant for them. That was the exact moment my entire future changed. Not during the vows, not during the ceremony, not even during the argument that came afterward. It happened the second I saw my father straighten his cheap tie and pretend he didn't notice where they'd been placed. Because good parents do that sometimes. They swallow humiliation so their children can stay happy. And once I realized my parents were doing that for me, something inside me broke permanently. Before I tell you what happened next, take 1 second to subscribe and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I always wonder how many people out there know exactly what it feels like to watch someone disrespect the people who raised you. Now let me take you back. June 18th, the last morning I ever woke up as Ethan Calloway's fiancé, Ashford, Indiana, population barely over 9,000. The kind of town where everybody knows who fixed their roof and who missed church last Sunday. I grew up in a narrow white house on Willow Street, 1 bathroom, 3 bedrooms. A porch swing my dad rebuilt twice instead of replacing because good wood deserves another chance. My father, Daniel Bennett, worked construction for 34 years. Concrete, framing, roofing, whatever paid enough to keep the lights on. His hands always looked cracked no matter how much lotion my mother bought him. My mother, Teresa, worked at the elementary school cafeteria. She knew every kid by name, every allergy, every lunch account balance. Sometimes she used her own paycheck to quietly cover meals for children whose parents couldn't afford them. We never had money, not really, but we had dignity, and somehow that matters more. I didn't realize how rare that kind of love was until I met Ethan. I was 27 when we met at a charity fundraiser hosted at the medical center where I worked as a physician assistant. He walked into the room wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my first car. Tall, polished, effortlessly confident, the kind of man who never checks prices before ordering wine. His family owned half the commercial property in Ashford County. Shopping centers, apartment complexes, country clubs. The Callaways were old money pretending to be humble, which somehow made them worse. But Ethan. At first, he didn't seem like them. That's the dangerous part. Men like that rarely do in the beginning. He listened when I talked, opened doors, remembered details, drove 40 minutes in a thunderstorm once just because I mentioned craving soup after a 12-hour shift. I thought kindness like that meant character. I confused attention with integrity. That mistake almost tied me permanently to the wrong family. The first warning sign came when I met his mother, Vivian Calloway, perfect pearls. Perfect posture, perfect smile sharp enough to cut glass. She shook my hand at dinner and said, "A physician assistant, how practical." Practical, the way she said it made my entire profession sound temporary. Like I was someone filling in until real success arrived. Ethan squeezed my knee under the table afterward. "She's traditional," he whispered later. "Don't overthink it." That became his answer for everything, every rude comment, every insult hidden inside politeness. Every moment his family treated mine like background noise. Don't overthink it. I should have. Because by the time I finally understood what kind of people they really were, I was already standing in a wedding dress while my parents sat beside a trash can pretending not to feel ashamed. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. That's the cruel thing about hindsight. It turns red flags into memories you can't stop replaying. At the time, I kept explaining everything away because I loved Ethan. Or maybe because I loved the version of him I thought existed. There's a difference. I just didn't know it yet. The engagement happened 14 months after we started dating. Ethan rented the rooftop restaurant overlooking downtown Indianapolis. Candles everywhere. Live violinist. Private dining room. The entire thing looked like a scene from a movie people like me usually only watch, not live inside. When he got down on one knee, I cried immediately. Not because of the ring, because for one reckless moment I thought I had finally been chosen completely. Not tolerated, not evaluated, chosen. That illusion lasted exactly 6 days. That's when wedding planning began, and Vivian Calloway quietly took control of everything. The venue, the florist, the guest list, the menu, even the color palette somehow became her decision. Every time I tried pushing back, Ethan had the same calm response. Let her have this one thing. One thing became another thing. then another, then everything. My mother suggested adding her peach cobbler recipe to the dessert table because it had been served at every wedding in our family since 1978. Vivian smiled softly before saying, "That's adorable, Teresa, but this is a formal reception." Adorable, like my mother was a child offering crayons to architects. I saw the hurt flash across Mom's face before she covered it with a smile. That moment stayed with me, not because it was dramatic, because it was practiced. Vivian knew exactly how to insult people without technically sounding cruel. And Ethan, he heard every word, still said nothing. That became the pattern, always silence, always later, always not the right time. One night, about 2 months before the wedding, I finally confronted him. We were driving home from his parents' country club after another dinner where Vivian spent 20 straight minutes talking about Ethan's ex-girlfriend. A corporate attorney from Chicago, old money, perfect pedigree. The kind of woman Vivian clearly wished he'd married instead. "Why does your mother keep comparing me to her?" I asked quietly. Ethan sighed like he was exhausted already. "She's just trying to understand you, understand me. We've been engaged for almost a year." "I know, Claire." "Then why does it still feel like I'm interviewing for this family?" That question changed the atmosphere in the car instantly. Not because he got angry, because he got careful. And careful people are dangerous, especially when they're trying not to reveal what they really think. "You take things personally sometimes," he said finally. There it was, that subtle shift, not defending his mother, correcting me instead. I stared out the passenger window the rest of the drive, wondering why loneliness somehow felt worse sitting beside someone than sitting alone. Still, I stayed, because leaving before the wedding felt dramatic, embarrassing. Temporary problems shouldn't destroy permanent commitments, that's what I told myself. And honestly, part of me was scared, not of being alone, of being wrong, wrong about him, wrong about us. Wrong about the future I'd already started building in my head. So I kept compromising, kept shrinking pieces of myself to fit inside rooms that never fully welcomed me, and little by little, my family started noticing. My father especially. One Sunday after dinner, while helping him fix the loose railing on the porch, he asked something that still haunts me. "You happy, kiddo?" Simple question, but the way he asked it carefully, like he already suspected the answer, made my chest tighten immediately. "Of course," I lied. Dad nodded slowly, then tightened one last bolt before saying something I didn't understand until much later. "Just make sure nobody makes you feel grateful for being loved." God, if only I had listened harder. Because 3 months later, I would walk into a ballroom full of chandeliers and finally discover exactly what kind of love Ethan Calloway was actually offering me. The morning of the wedding felt strangely calm. Too calm, like the air before a tornado when everything goes silent right before destruction arrives. I woke up in my childhood bedroom just after 6. Same pale yellow walls. Same dresser my father built when I was 12 because we couldn't afford the one I wanted from the furniture store. My wedding dress hung beside the closet door. Simple ivory satin, elegant, paid for with my own savings. Vivian had tried convincing me to buy a designer gown from Chicago that cost more than my parents' yearly mortgage payments. I refused. At the time, I thought that small act of resistance meant something. Now I know it was just the only boundary they allowed me to keep. By 10 o'clock, the Ashford Country Club looked like a magazine photo shoot. Crystal chandeliers, white roses everywhere, gold-trimmed place settings. String quartet warming up beside the garden fountain, everything polished to perfection, everything expensive enough to make people behave differently inside it. 200 guests were expected, most from Ethan's world, investors, developers. Country club families, people whose watches cost more than my car. The rest were mine. My Aunt Carol from Dayton, 3 nurses from the clinic, old neighbors from Willow Street. People who brought homemade gifts wrapped in department store paper because that's what normal families do. I noticed the divide almost immediately. Ethan's guests filled the center of the room. Front tables, dance floor area, prime seating. My side was scattered farther back like leftover pieces from a puzzle nobody wanted completed. My maid of honor, Rachel, leaned toward me during rehearsal and whispered, "Why are all your relatives near the exits?" I forced a smile. Probably just balancing numbers. But deep down, something already felt wrong. The ceremony itself passed like a blur. Music, vows, applause. Ethan looked perfect standing under those white floral arches. That was always his talent. Looking perfect, even when something ugly lived underneath. After the ceremony, guests moved outside for cocktails while I slipped back into the ballroom to check the reception setup. Call it habit from working in medicine. I verify things. Twice, the room was breathtaking. 20 tables, candles glowing softly, crystal glasses catching chandelier light, and directly in front of the dance floor, table 1, the family table, the most important seats in the room. That's where our parents were supposed to sit together. I walked over smiling automatically, then stopped. Every seat card at the table carried a Calloway name. Vivian's brother, Vivian's cousins, business partners, country club friends, no Bennetts. Not one. At first I thought there had to be some mistake, so I checked another table, then another, then another. My heartbeat got louder with every step until finally I found them. Table 16, last row in the ballroom, pressed beside the swinging kitchen doors. Next to a service station stacked with dirty glasses, the chairs didn't even match the rest of the reception. They were folding banquet chairs covered in cheap white fabric, and sitting right in the middle, 2 cream-colored place cards. Daniel Bennett, Teresa Bennett. I just stood there staring. Because suddenly every small moment from the last 2 years rearranged itself inside my head. Every insult, every excuse, every silence from Ethan. None of it was accidental. This was intentional, careful, deliberate. A wedding planner walked past carrying menus. I stopped her instantly. Who changed the seating chart? She hesitated only half a second. Mrs. Calloway requested adjustments this morning. My stomach dropped. Why? She said the bride approved them. Approved them. That word almost made me laugh because I hadn't approved anything. I stood alone in that ballroom listening to dishes crash behind the kitchen doors and imagined exactly how the evening would unfold. My father pretending not to notice the service carts. My mother smiling politely while rich strangers looked past her. And Vivian watching the entire thing knowing she'd successfully taught my parents where they belonged. That was the moment something inside me became very still, not emotional, clear, because suddenly I understood the truth. If I married Ethan, this would never stop. Table 16 wasn't a mistake. It was a preview of the rest of my life. I went looking for Ethan immediately. At that point, part of me still believed he would fix it, that he would see what his mother had done and finally choose me over keeping the peace. Love makes intelligent people dangerously optimistic. I found him in the groom's suite adjusting his cufflinks in front of a full-length mirror. Calm, relaxed, completely unbothered. That should have told me everything before he even spoke. Why are my parents at table 16? I asked. He didn't turn around right away, just kept fixing his sleeve. Mom adjusted a few things this morning. Adjusted, like my parents were centerpieces moved around for better lighting. They're beside the kitchen, Ethan. He sighed softly. Not guilty, annoyed. Claire, please don't start this right now. That sentence hit harder than I expected, because people only say don't start this when they already know something is wrong. You knew. He finally turned toward me then. And what terrified me most was how normal he looked. No shame, no outrage, nothing. The Hamiltons and the Parkers are sitting at the front, he explained carefully. My mother was trying to organize important guests together. Important. There it was, one word exposing everything underneath the performance. So my parents aren't important? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He stepped closer, lowering his voice into that calm professional tone he used during business dinners. Baby, we have 200 people here. Let's not create unnecessary drama before the reception. Unnecessary drama? My father being hidden beside a trash station was apparently reasonable. My reaction to it was the problem. I stared at him, searching desperately for something. Anger, embarrassment, regret. Anything proving this wasn't who he really was. But sometimes people reveal themselves quietly, without shouting, without cruelty. Just through what they're willing to tolerate. And Ethan was willing to tolerate my parents being humiliated as long as the evening stayed comfortable for everyone else. That realization hollowed something out inside me instantly. I walked out before I started crying. Not because I wanted to protect him, because I refused to break apart in front of someone who didn't deserve to witness it. As I crossed the hallway toward the ballroom again, I stopped beside the welcome table near the entrance. Stacks of wedding programs sat arranged neatly beside a gold guest book. I picked one up absent-mindedly, then froze, page 2. With gratitude to our families. Underneath, an entire section thanking the Callaways by name, Ethan's parents, grandparents, family business, family foundation, but nowhere, anywhere were my parents mentioned. 3 weeks earlier, I had personally approved a different version, one that began with, "To Daniel and Teresa Bennett, whose sacrifices made this day possible." I remembered writing those words myself. Now they were gone, erased completely. Not crossed out, not shortened, removed. That hurt even worse than the seating chart somehow, because this wasn't just exclusion, it was deletion. My parents had helped pay for this wedding. $12,000 they spent over years of savings. My father picked up overtime construction shifts in winter to contribute. My mother skipped vacations for almost a decade. And Vivian erased them from the program like they never existed at all. I found Rachel near the bridal suite touching up lipstick. One look at my face and she immediately stood up. "What happened?" I told her everything. The tables, the programs, Ethan's reaction, all of it. Rachel listened silently, didn't interrupt once, then asked the only question that actually mattered. "What do you want to do?" I opened my mouth, then stopped. Because until that exact moment, I still thought this situation could somehow be repaired. But now something much darker was growing inside me. Not panic, not sadness, certainty. And deep down, I think Rachel saw it before I did. Rachel closed her lipstick case slowly and looked at me with the kind of calm only real friends have during disasters. Not fake reassurance, not panic, steady. "What do you need from me?" she asked quietly. That question almost made me cry because everyone else in that building kept telling me what I should tolerate. Rachel was the first person asking what I needed. "Stay close," I whispered. "I'm not leaving." And she meant it. That's the thing about genuine loyalty. It doesn't perform itself loudly, it just stays. I walked back toward the groom's suite one more time, not to argue. Not anymore, I just needed to hear something. One sentence. One sign that Ethan understood how wrong this was. Because if there was even a small chance he didn't fully realize what his mother had done, maybe this could still be saved. The hallway outside the suite was empty, the door cracked open slightly, and before I could knock, I heard Vivian's voice. Cold, controlled, the way people sound when they stop pretending to be kind. "Look at her father's suit," she said quietly. "It looks 15 years old." Ethan laughed softly under his breath, not loudly, not cruelly, almost worse. Then Vivian continued. "And Teresa altered that dress herself, didn't she?" A pause. "Then Ethan, she probably did." Something inside my chest tightened painfully, but I still didn't move. Because deep down, I think I already knew this conversation would decide everything. "You cannot have those people sitting at the front," Vivian said. "The Parkers and Hamiltons are right there." "I know," Ethan answered calmly. "That's why we moved them." "We, not she, we." I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. Suddenly the hallway felt too narrow to breathe inside. Then Vivian said the sentence I will remember for the rest of my life. "She doesn't belong in this family, Ethan." Silence. 1 second, 2, 3. And then, "You're probably right." That was it. No hesitation, no defense, no "don't talk about her like that." Just agreement. Simple, easy, like he'd been thinking it privately for a long time already. I stopped hearing the rest clearly after that. Blood rushed into my ears so loudly it drowned everything else. Because in that moment, every lie I told myself collapsed simultaneously. The dinners, the comments, the excuses, the compromises. I wasn't marrying a man trapped between two worlds. I was marrying a man who agreed with his mother and simply hid it better. That realization changed something permanent inside me. I stepped away from the door before they noticed me. And strangely, I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't even crying. I just felt clear, terrifyingly clear. Like the exact moment before emergency surgery when every distraction disappears and instinct takes over. I walked back toward the ballroom slowly. Guests were laughing now. Servers carrying champagne, music drifting through crystal chandeliers. 200 people celebrating a future that suddenly no longer existed. Rachel met me halfway down the corridor, one look at my face and she immediately knew. "What did he say?" I repeated it word for word. "She doesn't belong in this family." Rachel closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again sharper than before. Claire, she said carefully, have you signed the marriage license yet? I frowned. What? The license, she repeated. When did you sign it? And suddenly I remembered. We hadn't yet. The officiant signed after the ceremony. The witnesses were supposed to sign during dinner, Ethan and I last. Vivian insisted on making it some dramatic public moment during dessert. Rachel grabbed my wrist gently. Legally, she said quietly, you are not married until that paper is signed and filed. The hallway went silent around me. Because suddenly everything changed. This wasn't divorce anymore. This wasn't escape after the fact. This was choice. And standing there in my wedding dress while music echoed through the ballroom, I realized I still had one left. I found my parents at table 16, still sitting there politely, still pretending everything was fine. My father had his hands folded carefully on the table like he was afraid taking up too much space might somehow make things worse. My mother kept smoothing invisible wrinkles from her dress sleeves. That broke me more than anything else, because she had sewn those sleeves herself. 3 weekends at the kitchen table adjusting lace by hand because she wanted to look beautiful at her daughter's wedding. And someone had looked at her effort and decided it belonged beside a trash bin. Dad smiled when he saw me approaching. You look beautiful, kiddo. God, even then he was trying to protect my feelings. Dad, my voice almost cracked. I'm so sorry, he lifted one hand gently. Don't do that. But Claire, he said softly, I can sit anywhere. That sentence destroyed something inside me permanently. Because people who spend their whole lives working hard learn how to survive disrespect quietly. And suddenly I realized my parents weren't upset about the table. They were upset about me, worried I'd ruin my wedding defending them. Still protecting me while they were the ones being humiliated. I looked around the ballroom slowly. Crystal chandeliers, expensive wine, imported flowers, and every single plate of food in that room partly paid for by my parents. $12,000, 15 years of savings, construction overtime, cafeteria paychecks, and the people who helped fund the evening were hidden beside the service entrance like an embarrassment. Something cold settled inside my chest then. Not rage, finality. I turned toward my mother. Did Vivian say anything to you? Mom forced a smile too quickly. No, sweetheart, everything's lovely. Lie, gentle lie, protective lie. But before I could respond, the kitchen door burst open behind them with a loud clang. A server rushed through carrying dirty trays. My mother flinched instinctively, and that was it. That tiny movement, that tiny embarrassed reaction, I was done. Completely. Across the ballroom, I spotted Ethan laughing near the dance floor beside his mother. Comfortable, relaxed, like none of this mattered. I walked toward him immediately. People smiled as I passed, guests reaching for champagne. Servers pouring wine, nobody realizing the wedding had already died 15 minutes earlier. I grabbed Ethan's arm near one of the marble columns. We need to talk now, he frowned instantly. Claire, what are you doing? Your mother insulted my parents again. His expression tightened with irritation instead of concern. What did she say this time? This time, wrong answer. She mocked my mother's dress. Ethan exhaled slowly like a man dealing with exhaustion. Claire, no, don't Claire me right now. Several nearby guests started glancing toward us. Ethan noticed immediately. Of course he did. Image mattered more to him than truth ever would. Please lower your voice, he whispered sharply. That sentence made everything suddenly simple. Not easy, simple. Because right there, standing in the middle of our wedding reception, he cared more about avoiding a scene than defending the woman he claimed to love. Go apologize to my parents, I said quietly. Ethan stared at me, then looked across the room toward Vivian. I watched the exact moment he made his choice. Again. I'm not creating drama during the reception, he said calmly. My stomach turned cold. So that's it? Your parents are fine, he answered. They're tough people, like surviving humiliation somehow made it acceptable. Then he straightened his jacket, adjusted his cuffs, and walked back toward table 1 beside his mother. And as I stood there alone listening to the string quartet play soft, expensive music, I realized something terrifying. I didn't want to marry him anymore. Not tomorrow, not after counseling, not after apologies, not ever. And once that truth entered my mind, there was no going back. I walked back to table 16 slowly. Not because I was uncertain, because I was thinking clearly for the first time in 2 years. The ballroom looked different now. Once you stop trying to belong somewhere, you start seeing the room honestly. I noticed how Ethan's family occupied space like ownership came naturally to them. How my relatives sat carefully, politely, trying not to inconvenience anyone. How the servers smiled wider at the front tables. How Vivian laughed loudly enough for important people to hear her. The entire night was structured around hierarchy, and my parents had been placed exactly where the Callaways believed they belonged, at the bottom. Rachel was already watching me from across the room. The second our eyes met, she knew, not the details, the decision. Dad looked up as I reached the table again. "You okay, kiddo?" I stared at him for a long moment. At the wrinkles around his eyes, the rough hands resting beside untouched silverware, the tie he only wore for funerals and important occasions. Then I looked at my mother, at the lace sleeves she stitched herself, at the careful smile she was still forcing for my sake, and suddenly I wasn't afraid anymore, not of embarrassment, not of gossip, not of walking away, because the worst thing already happened. I had seen the truth. "Stay here," I said quietly. Mom frowned slightly. "Claire, I'll be right back." Rachel met me halfway to the stage. "You sure?" she asked softly. I took one slow breath. "No," I admitted honestly. "But I'm done pretending." Then I walked toward the microphone. The MC was in the middle of some harmless story about Ethan's college years when he noticed me approaching. He smiled automatically and handed me the microphone without hesitation, probably assuming I wanted to give some emotional bride speech. The room applauded lightly as I stepped onto the stage. 200 people looking up at me beneath crystal chandeliers. Ethan's smile faded immediately. Vivian's eyes narrowed. Good, let them wonder. I adjusted the microphone slowly, and suddenly the entire ballroom became silent. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began. My voice sounded calm, steadier than I felt. "Years in emergency medicine teach you how to function while your heart is breaking. I know everyone came here expecting to celebrate a marriage." A few guests exchanged confused glances. Across the room, Ethan started standing. I kept going before he could interrupt. "But before anything else," I said, "I need everyone to look toward the back of this ballroom." Heads turned automatically, toward table 16, toward my parents, toward the folding chairs beside the kitchen doors. Confusion spread across faces almost instantly. "My parents are sitting there," I continued quietly. "The people who helped raise me, support me, and pay for part of this wedding." Now the room was completely still. No silverware, no whispers, nothing. Earlier today, they were removed from the family table and placed beside the service entrance instead. Gasps, small at first, then more. Ethan finally reached the edge of the stage. "Claire," he hissed quietly, "stop." I looked directly at him. "No," one word, but it felt like cutting chains off my own body. I turned back toward the guests. When I confronted Ethan about it, he told me not to create drama, and when his mother mocked my parents privately, I paused briefly. He agreed with her. Vivian stood up immediately. "This is inappropriate." "No," I interrupted calmly. "What's inappropriate is making two hardworking people feel ashamed for not being wealthy enough." The room shifted. You could feel it happening. People looking differently at the Callaways now, not admiring them, evaluating them. And for the first time all evening, Vivian looked nervous. I tightened my grip on the microphone slightly. Because now that I'd started, I wasn't stopping until every person in that ballroom understood exactly why this wedding was about to end. The silence inside that ballroom felt electric. Like everyone suddenly realized they were no longer attending a wedding. They were witnessing something collapse in real time. Ethan stepped onto the stage beside me, jaw tight enough to crack teeth. "Give me the microphone," he whispered sharply. I held it closer instead. "No." That single word changed the entire power dynamic instantly, because men like Ethan survive on quiet compliance. And for the first time since he met me, I wasn't giving him any. Vivian stood near table 1 looking horrified, not heartbroken, humiliated. "There's a difference. This is exactly the kind of behavior I warned you about," she snapped loudly. Several guests shifted awkwardly, but nobody defended her. Interesting how quickly people distance themselves from cruelty once it becomes public. I looked directly at Vivian. "You warned him that I would defend my parents?" Her face tightened. "That's not what I meant." "It's exactly what you meant." Ethan reached for my arm carefully, still trying to perform calm control. Claire, please, he whispered through clenched teeth. You're embarrassing yourself. That sentence hit me strangely, because 5 hours earlier it would have worked. I would have apologized, lowered my voice, questioned my own reaction. But humiliation loses power once you stop fearing other people's opinions. And suddenly, I didn't care who was uncomfortable anymore. No, I said clearly into the microphone. I'm embarrassing you? A few people actually looked away after that, because truth creates discomfort faster than shouting ever could. I stepped farther from Ethan before continuing. My parents spent years sacrificing for me. My father worked overtime construction shifts to help pay for this wedding. My mother skipped vacations and saved every extra dollar she could. Across the ballroom, my mother was crying quietly now. Dad kept one arm around her shoulders while staring at me with an expression I'll never forget. Not embarrassment, pride. You treated them like they were beneath you, I continued, looking directly at Vivian and Ethan. And the worst part is neither of you even thought it was wrong. Ethan finally lost patience then. Enough, he snapped. The room froze because there it was, the real version of him, not polished, not charming, angry, cornered. You're turning one seating mistake into a public spectacle, he said. Mistake? I repeated softly, then I looked at the guests again. I heard them talking earlier. Now Ethan's face changed completely. Sharp panic. Vivian noticed too. I continued before either could stop me. I heard Ethan's mother say I didn't belong in their family. My voice steadied even more, and I heard Ethan agree with her. Gasps spread openly now. No more pretending. No more social politeness protecting them. Vivian's composure cracked instantly. You were listening outside private conversations? Interesting, not denial, just anger at being exposed. Ethan looked around the ballroom, desperately realizing something terrifying. People were judging him now, really judging him. The investors, the business partners, the families whose opinions mattered deeply inside his world. And suddenly he cared, not when my parents were humiliated. Now, because now it affected him. That realization removed the final piece of love I still carried for him. I slowly slid the engagement ring off my finger. The entire room noticed immediately. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. I spent 2 years convincing myself your silence meant pressure, I said quietly to Ethan. But silence is a choice too. His expression shifted instantly. Finally, fear, real fear. Claire, he said softer now, don't do this. Too late, way too late. I placed the ring gently on the microphone stand between us. The diamond caught chandelier light as the room collectively held its breath. Then I said the sentence that changed my entire life. I deserve a family that doesn't treat love like a social ranking. And with that, I walked off the stage, straight toward table 16, where the only 2 people in that ballroom who never made me earn their respect were waiting for me. The ballroom exploded behind me the second I stepped off that stage. Whispers, arguments, chairs moving, people pretending not to stare while staring directly anyway, but I barely heard any of it. Because my focus locked onto my parents. Mom stood up the moment I reached the table. Claire, she whispered shakily. Then she hugged me hard, the kind of hug mothers give when they realize their child just walked through fire. I'm sorry, I whispered into her shoulder. For what? She asked immediately. That question almost broke me, because even now she still thought protecting my feelings mattered more than her own humiliation. Dad looked past me toward the stage where Ethan and Vivian were surrounded by confused guests. Then he looked back at me carefully. You sure about this? Simple question. No pressure, no guilt, just concern for me. And suddenly I realized something devastating. The poorest people in that ballroom had shown me the richest kind of love all night. Yes, I answered quietly. And for the first time that entire day, I meant something completely. Rachel appeared beside us carrying my overnight bag somehow. I still have no idea when she packed it. That's another thing real friends do. They prepare for your survival before you even realize you'll need rescuing. Your car's out front, she said softly. Behind us, Ethan was pushing through the crowd toward me now. Claire, I turned slowly, his tie loosened, hair messy, perfect image finally cracking apart. Please just talk to me privately, he said breathlessly. Privately, of course, because men like him only value privacy once public consequences begin. There's nothing left to discuss. That's not true. I stared at him for a long moment. Really stared, And for the first time since I met him, I saw him clearly, not evil, not monstrous, just weak. Weak enough to sacrifice people he claimed to love for comfort and approval. And honestly, that felt worse. "You let your mother humiliate my parents," I said quietly, "and you agreed with her." His expression tightened immediately. "I was trying to keep peace." "No," I corrected softly, "you were protecting status." That landed. Because deep down he knew it was true. Vivian approached then, still furious. "You've humiliated this family." I actually laughed once under my breath, not bitterly, just tired. "No," I replied. "I exposed it." Her face hardened instantly. "Good, let her stay angry. People like Vivian survive by making others feel small enough to stay silent. And tonight I finally refused." Ethan looked desperate now. "We can fix this?" That sentence almost fascinated me because somehow he still thought the problem was the wedding, not the values underneath it. "You can't fix what you truly believe," I said. Silence. And once again, he had no response. Dad picked up my overnight bag then like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Come on, kiddo," he said gently. "Let's go home." Home, that word hit differently now, not embarrassment. Not something temporary until I entered a richer family. Something solid, something honest. As we walked toward the ballroom exit, people moved aside quietly, watching, evaluating, some sympathetic, some shocked. Some probably already turning this into gossip for tomorrow morning. I didn't care, because for the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking myself to fit inside someone else's world. Outside, warm summer rain hit my skin softly. The parking lot lights blurred against wet pavement. Mom linked her arm through mine while Dad loaded the car. And standing there in my wedding dress beneath the stormy Indiana sky, I realized something freeing. Walking away from the wrong love isn't failure. Sometimes it's the first truly courageous thing you do for yourself. And honestly, I'd rather spend my life at table 16 with people who love me completely than sit at table 1 beside people ashamed of where I came from. Before you go, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment telling me what you would have done in my place. And remember, the right people will never make you feel embarrassed by the ones who loved you before success ever found you.